So whenever you're looking around online, considering whether or not you should move to a major city like San Francisco or New York City to start your software engineering career, inevitably there's going to be a flood of comments talking about cost of living. And I actually don't think that a high cost of living is that big of a downside for a few main reasons. My name is Alex Bianchi. I'm an incoming software engineer at Datadog based in New York City, and I just interned at Google where my team was based out of San Francisco. So I've weighed the options of the major cities. I actually had another offer from General Motors to be a software engineer in Detroit, Michigan, where the salary was about half of what I might be able to get in San Francisco or New York. And that's because, companies aren't stupid. And unless you get super lucky and you find a remote first company paying big city salaries, in which case, take that salary and go live in the middle of nowhere, North Carolina, saving all the money in the world, chances are your company is going to reflect the cost of living in your income. So then the conversation needs to be about how well do companies adjust for cost of living. And largely, this is a person-to-person, company-to-company, location-to-location problem, so do be sure to crunch your own numbers. But something to keep in mind is that if you save, say, a third of your income in San Francisco, then that could very well wind up being, $60,000. But let's say instead you're living in Detroit, Michigan, and the cost of living is half that of San Francisco, and therefore you cut the salary perfectly in half to $100,000. So if you're saving a third of your income, you wind up with, say, $30,000. Over the course of 10 years, and I'm not including compound interest, and all of this is a lot more complicated than I'm kind of making it seem, but I'm just trying to illustrate a point, you're gonna wind up with a difference of $300,000 between those two savings. Now, sure, if you want to continue living in San Francisco, that makes sense because you're gonna need your inflated $600,000 of savings if you wanted to live a proportional amount of time without working. But if you live in San Francisco, you can take all that money that you just saved and move to Detroit, Michigan, move to the countryside, move to a more residential area, as opposed to your Detroit, Michigan salary where your savings can't move you into San Francisco. So over time, as you save a third of your inflated salary, I actually think you come out on top in the sense that you have the freedom to move wherever you want. A more interesting example, I think, comes in the form of, say, California, San Francisco versus something like Chicago, Illinois. Both major cities, both have a decent cost of living associated with them, but between the taxes and lower cost of living of Chicago, my host at Google actually said that when he moved from California to Illinois, between the taxes and the differences and everything, he wound up bringing home more money than he was making in California. There's also something to be said for the fact that expensive places to live are expensive for a reason. It's because people like living there. Now, whether they like living there just because that's where their company is, or they like living there because it's California and you're right next to a bunch of wilderness and you have great weather and the ocean is right there and the city has a bunch to do. Like, I personally enjoy all of those things I just listed about San Francisco. So if I would much rather live there than, say, Michigan or somewhere that doesn't have the city, which I personally really enjoy city life, or doesn't have the ocean. I grew up next to the ocean, so that's pretty important to me. And a city and an ocean, those are both things that are going to inflate cost of living, but that's okay because that's where I want to live. And why are we software engineers? Why are we in this lucrative industry if we're not going to be able to live where we want to live? So when you are considering places that you might want to move out of college for your junior software engineering position, keep in mind the actual qualities of the place that you're moving to, the taxes of the state, the cost of living. Are you going to need a car? What's your rent situation going to look like? Can you afford to buy a house maybe? And then, you're saving money by putting it into that mortgage. That could potentially be a very fruitful situation for you long term. Maybe you can't buy a house right out of college, but after a few years of saving, someone might be able to buy a house in a residential part of New Jersey and then commute to New York City, as opposed to San Francisco, where good luck buying a house in California within the first few years of your career. But if you take one thing away from this video, just know that those people screaming on the internet about how terrible high cost of living places are to live, it's a multidimensional problem and you're well within your right to want to move to one of those places. That's gonna be it for this video. I hope you subscribe. I have plenty of stuff about getting internships and getting your first job on my channel, so that's gonna be it. Peace.